the clinic manager said, well, Gina, if you think you can do that, why don't you just go do that? And that was my challenge to say, I thought in my head, okay, I think I will.
And really, and this is brutal, but success is broken up into there's a massive group trying and there's a small group doing. And the difference, sadly, that most people don't want to hear is that the successful group of people, right, and I'll include myself in what I'm about to say, is a very, very ordinary group, right? And I mean that respectfully. There's no great mystery to any of it. There's not necessarily any extra level of Einstein intelligence or superiority in any way, shape, or form with individuals. But what there is an extraordinary commitment to things like taking action. And rather than waiting 6 months and emotionally feeling better about that price rise, there is I'm doing this today. I'm booking my flight now. I'm booking my seats and I'm doing the fucking thing, right? And I've found from, again, why I love doing these interviews and the podcast and getting close to people, I can get clues from people as to why they're successful. And that's the simplest one, is that people get given a challenge or a strategy or a new way of doing something and they act on it within minutes. And I got that. I remember Tony Robbins always used to say that the minute you hear a good idea, do something, anything that just takes you closer to it. If it's a good idea to go to an event, book the flight. Don't worry about the ticket. Don't worry about the hotel. Just book the flight, or book the ticket. Don't worry about the flight. Book the hotel. Don't worry about the ticket. It was like just one thing that took you closer to doing it, rather than, oh, I'll do that next week. I'll do that the week after. And in the end, unfortunately, it becomes the hallmark of most people's lives. Somebody like you builds a business that goes so quickly, we have to move premises and shoots past 7 figures and kind of has all these amazing things going on. It's not because you're lucky. It's not because you're privileged. It's not because of a certain area that you live in. It's because of what you've just described. And I think that's absolutely amazing. Take us back to when you started. What did people tell you when you first kind of mentioned maybe to people that you were going to start a cash practice? What was that like?
Oh, I have a great story about this. I don't think really anyone's fully heard the full story in the Paul Gough community, but I was working for a corporate private practice and a very well-known private practice in the US. And, we were having one of our monthly meetings with the manager where they go around and ask what your productivity has been for the month, and you report that, and they ask what you're doing for marketing and sales. And I had some really great ideas that I thought would be helpful and effective for the clinic. And long story short, I won't bore you with the details, but the clinic manager said, well, Gina, if you think you can do that, why don't you just go do that? And that was my challenge to say, I thought in my head, okay, I think I will. But I just, kept my cool and I just shook my head, and I took a lunch break after that and talked to my husband. I called him on the phone and I said, I think today's the day. I said, is it okay if I go ahead and resign? I want to start my own business. I don't know what that looks like. I have no idea. Do we have the finances to pay the bills? Are you comfortable with me quitting? He said, yeah, you should do it. And so I called that manager and I said, I'm resigning. I gave her sufficient notice. And I said, I think that I realized that this is something I should do. So I was very respectful. But when she said that, I thought, you know what, I need no other extra motivation than to right now say, this is the last day that I will put up with this nonsense. And so I had no idea what I was doing, except for the fact that, Paul, I had been following you for a couple of years. And I didn't know how to go about starting my own practice, especially cash pay. Yeah. But your message resonated so deeply with me, and what your mission and vision was for not only your business, but that you had actually made it work. And you made it work in an area that was very challenging for it to work. Maybe, with the NHS, and you have people who are paying you cash, and you have these multi-million-dollar, practices who are very successful. And I thought, and you just spoke very real and very clearly. And I thought, this is the guy I want to follow. So because I've been following you, I had some ideas stored away of what I wanted to do. And when I resigned, I started working on, the idea of building my own business. But yes, when I told people kind of my ideas of what I was going to do, they said, so one of my friends, she was actually the head of the Private Practice Association in Colorado at the time. And she said, the very worst idea you could ever do, the worst thing you could do is open up your own practice. She was the head of the private practice. And I said, well, I'm not going to do it the way. And I said, I'm not going to do it the way you do it. She said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm not going to take any insurance. She said, that'll never work. People aren't going to pay for that. I said, well, people pay to go get their hair straight, and they pay for their nails. They pay for these elaborate massages. They value that. And I said, I think I'm just going to try it. I can always go back to this. And so
it's like just to jump in there, the head of this kind of sums up. I think this sums up life. I'm often on a crusade for, you've obviously been around me for a while, right? I'm anti-system, I'm anti-government, I'm anti-rules, I'm anti bullshit, I'm anti-whatever, right? There's so much stuff out there that's just complete bullshit that people are following, and they're literally lemons walking off a cliff, just following each other off a cliff, right? And it's because of things like this that I hear that you've got the head of the Colorado private practice section who's supposed to be your go-to individual for hope and opportunity and sort of know-how and all of these things that you assume that this person's going to get and give you. And they're telling you the best thing that you can do is not start a practice. And we wonder why this world is going wrong. And there is so much shit and unhappiness and lack of productivity or fulfillment. What I'm interested in is your lessons on spending money to make money. Tell us a little bit about that as a business owner. You're doing fantastically well. It's a business now that's past 7 figures and doing amazing. You are smashing it as it goes, right? I'm not going to say anything other than that. You're just nailing it. How have you got there so quick? Tell me some lessons, what you've learned on spending money to make money, because I think you have that mindset, but I think that many people who want what you've got want to do it without that. How do I invest in staff or invest in marketing or investing in yourself or whatever it will be? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I'll tell you, I first started out with literally $0 in the bank. I had no savings for this because it happened earlier than I thought. So
What was the timeline from that day where the girl in the office said, "Oh, if you want to do your own thing, go do it"? What was the timeline from that to the resignation? Bring me in on that.
I gave her 6 weeks notice. So I gave her a lot of notice.
But what was that the same day though? You resigned, was it that day or the next day? The same day. So
no, that day.
So this
We were done.
that day. So this is what did I say at the start? What did I say at the start, right? How you do anything is how you do everything. And that wouldn't have surprised me. I was almost going to say, you let me write it down. I was going to say 2 weeks. From that day to that, it took you a day from this isn't going to work, this is not where I want to be, to I'm resigning, to I'm moving. And however many, year or 2, 3 later, we're running a practice that's moved on, 7 figures, staff. The speed at which you make your decisions is your biggest asset. Never forget that. So we resigned.
It was 2 hours, Paul. Instead of 2 weeks, it was 2 hours. So the meeting was around noon. And I remember it was 2:30 when I called her. And I requested a meeting about an hour later after the meeting. And at 2:30, I called her. So it was 2 hours. So that was the timeline. And I had no money saved up for this. But I thought, part of what I did when I started was that I wanted to give back to the community. I really had no other objective in that other than I needed a little bit of a break. I was feeling burnout. And so I started a mobile practice, but I started volunteering at 2 local high schools, and they couldn't have been any different. One was a local high school that was very, very wealthy. The tuition there at the time was about $25,000 a year for the high school students. And the other school was in downtown Denver. A lot of the students were very impoverished. They didn't know where their next meal was coming from. And so I volunteered and I gave back to those 2 separate communities. And in that, I developed so many relationships. And my business started growing organically. I reached out to some, physicians that I had networks with. I reached out to some other former clients. But for the most part, it grew, I think, for the first 6 months pretty slowly, and that I just let things happen as they will. I started treating patients very well. People started hearing about this girl who's driving all around Denver with a table in the back of her car going into people's homes. And I started saving up cash. I took out a $10,000 line of credit and I paid that off within a few months. And I just started saving money. And I built up a cash reserve. And I think, to answer your question, spending money to make money, I had to, at first, I did everything in the business, and I just saved. But I realized it was only going to get me so far. And if I really wanted a successful practice, I had to invest in people, and I had to invest in a team, and I had to invest in systems that would allow the business to grow and thrive. And I had to be a good leader in that. And so learning um, the value of knowing how to hire correctly and
Yeah.
recruit, and also have a team behind me that allows me to then make more profit, make more money, so we can, have nicer things and move into a bigger practice. That's kind of how it all started. And once I realized that it was okay to let go of a little bit of that money and invest not only in people, but equipment that would help drive more business, um, then that became a more comfortable thing to do. But you're right. It's just about making fast decisions, capitalizing on opportunities and not looking back and taking the risk.